This is the book of the generations of Adam. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. With these words, Genesis 5 opens not merely a list of names, but a theological bridge. The text deliberately echoes the language of Genesis 1. The genealogy does not begin with Seth. It does not begin with a later patriarch. It begins with creation itself. The narrative steps back, as if to remind us that everything which follows must be understood in light of the original design of God. The phrase, "the book of the generations," signals structure. Genesis is organized by such headings. They divide the narrative into theological units. Here, the focus is not on an isolated individual, but on continuity. We are invited to trace a line, an unbroken succession from Adam to Noah. And yet the first emphasis is not on succession, but on likeness. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. Male and female, he created them, and he blessed them and named them man when they were created. The genealogy begins with blessing. It begins with divine intention. The image of God stands at the head of the human story. Before we encounter the refrain of death, before we hear the measured tally of years, we are reminded of dignity. But the echo continues. When Adam had lived 130 years, he fathered a son in his own likeness, after his image, and named him Seth. The literary parallel is unmistakable. God made Adam in his likeness. Adam fathers Seth in his likeness. The image is transmitted. Humanity continues through generational reflection. And yet something has shifted. Genesis 1 spoke only of divine likeness. Genesis 5 speaks of human likeness. The text does not deny that Seth bears the image of God, but the emphasis has moved toward inheritance within a fallen condition. The image persists, but so does mortality. And this is where the rhythm of the chapter begins to unfold. Each generation follows a pattern. The name of the patriarch, the age at which he fathers a son, the years he lives afterward, the total years of his life, and the closing refrain, "and he died." Adam lived 930 years, and he died. Seth lived 912 years, and he died. Enosh lived 905 years, and he died. Kenan lived 910 years, and he died. Mahalalel lived 895 years, and he died. Jared lived 962 years, and he died. The repetition is deliberate. The structure is disciplined. The text resists embellishment. It is almost austere in its restraint. And yet its austerity is its message. Genesis 2 warned, "In the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die." Genesis 3 recorded the fall. Genesis 5 now records the slow unfolding of that sentence across centuries. The years are long, astonishingly long by our measure, but they are finite. Every life concludes. The divine word of judgment stands. This genealogy, therefore, is not a celebration of human achievement. It is not a heroic chronicle. It is a ledger of mortality. But it is also something more. Between the lines of death, life continues. Sons and daughters are born. The command to be fruitful and multiply is not erased by the fall. The blessing of Genesis 1 persists even under the shadow of Genesis 3. This tension defines the chapter. Blessing and judgment interwoven, image and decay side by side. The genealogy of Genesis 5 is often contrasted with the line of Cain in Genesis 4. There we saw cultural development, cities, music, metallurgy.
But we also saw escalating violence and defiance, culminating in Lamech's boast. Here, by contrast, the tone is sober. There are no recorded inventions, no poetic boasts, only quiet continuity. The text is not uninterested in culture. Rather, its interest lies elsewhere. It traces the line through which the promise of Genesis 3:15 may advance, the promise that the seed of the woman will ultimately crush the serpent. That promise is not mentioned explicitly in Genesis 5, but it hovers behind every birth announcement. Seth is born as a replacement for Abel. Enosh's days are marked by renewed invocation of the name of the Lord. The line continues, not because humanity is progressing morally, but because God is preserving a lineage. And in the midst of the steady drumbeat of death, one name disrupts the pattern. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he fathered Methuselah. Enoch walked with God after he fathered Methuselah 300 years. Thus, all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. For the first time, the refrain changes, not, and he died, but God took him. The structure invites us to feel the interruption. The pattern has conditioned us to expect death. Instead, we encounter translation. Enoch walked with God. The phrase suggests habitual communion, steady fidelity, a life oriented toward divine presence. His removal does not abolish mortality from the chapter. It stands as a sign, a quiet testimony that death does not possess ultimate sovereignty. Enoch's life is shorter than the others, 365 years, a number suggestive of completeness, though the text does not elaborate. What it emphasizes is relationship. He walked with God. Within a genealogy dominated by death, communion with God becomes the true marker of significance. And the pastoral weight of this is profound. Genesis 5 does not measure greatness by accomplishment. It does not catalog achievements. It records faithfulness within mortality. And so the chapter moves forward. Methuselah lives 969 years, yet even the longest life concludes with the same refrain.
And he died. The genealogy presses us toward a conclusion. It narrows toward a final figure. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he fathered a son and called his name Noah, saying, "Out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and from the painful toil of our hands." For the first time since Enoch, extended speech appears. Hope surfaces explicitly. Lamech names his son Noah, rest, comfort, relief. The curse of Genesis 3 has made labor grievous. The ground resists, humanity toils. Lamech looks at his newborn son and dares to hope that relief will come through him. The genealogy that began with the image of God now concludes with expectation of restoration. And yet the tension remains unresolved. Noah is born into a world still marked by death. The curse has not lifted. The rhythm of mortality has not ceased. Genesis 5 ends by informing us that Noah fathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The line continues. The structure is complete. From Adam to Noah, an unbroken succession, a preserved lineage, a sustained promise. But the chapter does not resolve the problem it exposes. It records the reality of death without yet overcoming it. It preserves hope without yet fulfilling it. And in this way, Genesis 5 functions as a theological hinge. It gathers the themes of creation, fall, image, blessing, curse, mortality, and promise, and carries them forward into the next movement of the narrative. The earth still bears the image of God through human generations, but it also bears the sentence of death. The promise still advances, but so does corruption. The genealogy stands as witness. God has not abandoned his design, yet humanity remains under judgment. The story is moving somewhere. And as we transition toward the days of Noah, we begin to sense that the persistence of life does not mean the absence of accountability. The line has been preserved, but the earth itself is about to be examined.
The genealogy of Genesis 5 is not merely a chronological bridge between Adam and Noah. It is a theological meditation on continuity under judgment. Its structure forms a disciplined rhythm, and that rhythm shapes our understanding of history itself. As the chapter unfolds, we are trained to listen for repetition. The patterned formula becomes almost liturgical. Years are counted, sons are named, days are totaled, and death concludes the account. This repetition is not redundancy, it is formation. In a world that often measures significance by novelty, Genesis 5 confronts us with sameness. Generation follows generation. The names change, but the ending does not. The text forces us to feel the weight of mortality, not as a dramatic interruption, but as a settled reality. Yet within that reality, something endures. The image of God, first declared at the beginning of the chapter, is not withdrawn. The text does not suggest that humanity has ceased to bear divine likeness. Rather, it quietly assumes its persistence. The ability to father children in his own likeness implies continuity of nature. Fallen, yes, mortal, certainly, but still human in the full sense intended by the Creator. This preservation of image amid death reveals something crucial about divine faithfulness. Judgment does not equal annihilation. The curse does not erase creation. Instead, history unfolds within a tension, life sustained under a sentence. The extraordinary lifespans recorded in Genesis 5 often draw curiosity. Why such extended years? The text itself offers no explanation. It does not defend, justify, or elaborate. It simply records. What we must observe, however, is the theological function of these long lives. They stretch the timeline, allowing continuity across centuries. Adam lives long enough to overlap with Lamech, the father of Noah. The early patriarchs exist in extended proximity to the origin of the human story. This compresses history in one sense, even as it expands it in another. The memory of Eden is not distant folklore, it lingers within living generations. But even 900 years cannot overcome the boundary established by divine decree. The refrain remains undefeated, and he died. The genealogy, therefore, speaks to the inevitability of judgment, but also to its measured unfolding. Death does not fall indiscriminately in a single catastrophic moment. It advances steadily, generation by generation. This gradual advance of mortality reflects the patience of God. The sentence pronounced in Eden unfolds across time. Humanity is given space to multiply, to build families, to invoke the name of the Lord, and yet the ultimate boundary remains.
Within this measured unfolding, Enoch stands again as a signpost of hope. His walking with God suggests that even in a dying world, communion is possible. The text does not romanticize his life. It gives no account of his words, no record of his deeds. It simply states that he walked with God. The simplicity of that description invites contemplation. In a genealogy otherwise concerned with years and offspring, the defining feature of Enoch's life is relationship. And his translation, God took him, serves as a quiet protest against the finality of death. It does not abolish death for others. Methuselah, his son, still dies, but it reveals that death is not beyond divine interruption. As the genealogy moves toward its conclusion, the birth of Noah introduces explicit theological reflection. Lamech's naming speech is significant. For the first time in this chapter, a father interprets the meaning of his son's life in relation to the curse. Out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief. The curse upon the ground in Genesis 3 has defined human labor as painful toil. Lamech's hope suggests that the burden has become deeply felt across generations. The weight of working resistant soil has shaped human existence. Noah's mem, associated with rest or comfort, expresses longing for reversal. It is an act of faith, perhaps imperfectly understood, but oriented toward relief from the curse. Yet the narrative tension increases here. We know, as readers moving forward, that Noah will not immediately remove the curse from the ground. Instead, the flood will intensify judgment before any renewal appears. This is important. Human expectation often seeks immediate relief, but divine purposes unfold through deeper cleansing before restoration. Genesis 5 therefore closes with both continuity and anticipation. The line from Adam has reached Noah. The promise has not been extinguished, but the conditions of the world remain unresolved. The pastoral dimension of this genealogy emerges precisely here. We live like these generations within continuity under tension. The image of God endures. Families rise and fall, years accumulate, and death remains an unyielding boundary. The chapter does not offer sentimental comfort. It does not deny grief. Instead, it places mortality within a larger narrative of divine preservation. The seed continues. That simple fact carries enormous theological weight. After the violence of Cain, after the corruption hinted at in the wider narrative, God has preserved a line. History is not random drift, it is guided continuity. But continuity alone does not guarantee righteousness. The genealogy remains morally restrained. Aside from Enoch, it offers no evaluation of character. It does not claim that each generation improved upon the last. This restraint prepares us for what follows. For if the line has been preserved, the broader condition of humanity is about to be assessed. The genealogy has focused narrowly on descent. The next chapter will widen the lens to the earth itself. And there, the verdict will not be limited to individual mortality. It will encompass collective corruption. Thus, Genesis 5 functions as a narrowing corridor leading to a vast opening. It secures the identity of Noah within the covenant line. It anchors him in Adamic humanity. It confirms that he stands within the image-bearing race. But it also situates him within a world still marked by curse and death. The genealogy does not solve the problem of Genesis 3. It transmits it forward. And in doing so, it prepares us to confront the next development, the moral state of the earth.
As we step back and consider Genesis 5 as a unified whole, its theological coherence becomes increasingly clear. This chapter is not an interruption in the narrative flow. It is an essential structure that sustains the drama of redemption. From Adam to Noah, the genealogy accomplishes several interwoven purposes. First, it confirms historical continuity. The human story does not fragment after Eden. it progresses through identifiable generations. The promise of the seed, spoken in the midst of judgment, is not abandoned. It is carried forward, name by name. Second, it establishes the universality of death. The repetition of "and he died" engraves the reality of mortality into the reader's consciousness. Death is not accidental. It is the outworking of divine judgment. The chapter refuses to let us romanticize early humanity. Longevity does not equal immunity. Third, it reveals the persistence of divine blessing. Despite judgment, humanity multiplies. Sons and daughters are born. The image of God remains operative. The Creator has not withdrawn his sustaining hand. Fourth, it introduces hope through interruption. Enoch's translation hints that fellowship with God transcends the grave. Noah's naming anticipates relief from the curse. These elements together form a theological foundation for what follows. For when Genesis 6 opens, the focus shifts dramatically. Instead of a narrow genealogical line, we encounter a broad assessment of the earth's condition. Violence fills the land, corruption spreads. The thoughts of the human heart are described as continually evil. The contrast is intentional. Genesis 5 has shown us continuity within the covenant line. Genesis 6 will show us corruption across humanity at large. The genealogy, therefore, intensifies the coming judgment. It demonstrates that time has been given. Generations have risen and fallen. Patience has stretched across centuries, yet the moral trajectory of the earth has not corrected itself. This progression carries pastoral weight for us as well. We too live in generational continuity. Families extend through time. We inherit not only genetic traits, but spiritual legacies. Faithfulness in one generation does not automatically secure faithfulness in the next, nor does corruption erase the possibility of preservation. Genesis 5 invites sober reflection on legacy. What does it mean to stand within a line? What does it mean to transmit life under the shadow of mortality? The chapter's restraint teaches us humility. Most of the names recorded are known to us only here. No deeds are attached, no monuments remain. Their lives are summarized in a few measured sentences. And yet, they matter. They matter because they are part of God's unfolding purpose. This challenges modern assumptions about significance. Scripture's valuation of a life is not tied to visibility or acclaim. Faithful continuity, quiet obedience, and the bearing of children within covenant hope participate in divine design. At the same time, the relentless refrain of death warns us against presumption. Long life, cultural development, or numerical growth cannot shield humanity from accountability. The earth in Noah's day will soon be described as filled with violence. The preservation of a godly line does not prevent the spread of wickedness elsewhere. Judgment, when it comes, will address the totality of corruption. Yet within that judgment, Noah will find favor. And here, the genealogy proves essential. Noah is not an isolated hero emerging from nowhere. He is the 10th generation through Adam, through Seth. He stands within preserved continuity. His life is rooted in divine faithfulness across centuries. Theologically, this underscores a pattern. God's redemptive work moves through history, not apart from it. He does not abandon creation when it falls. He sustains it generation by generation until the appointed moment of intervention arrives. The flood will not contradict Genesis 5. It will confirm its warnings. The sentence of death, already evident in every generation, will take on corporate form. But even in that corporate judgment, the seed will remain. This is the profound tension of Scripture, judgment and preservation intertwined.
As we conclude this meditation on Genesis 5, we must resist the temptation to treat it as mere background. It is formative. It shapes our understanding of time, mortality, and hope. It teaches us that history is neither chaotic nor self-redeeming. It unfolds under divine sovereignty. It teaches us that death is real and universal, yet not ultimate for those who walk with God. It teaches us that generational faithfulness matters, even when it appears ordinary. And it prepares us for a sobering transition. The earth, sustained through these generations, has not grown morally neutral. Corruption has deepened, violence has multiplied. The patience of God, displayed across centuries of extended lifespans, is about to meet decisive action. The genealogy ends with Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The future of humanity now rests within this family. But before renewal can come, the depth of corruption must be revealed. In our next episode, we will turn to Genesis 6 and examine the condition of the earth that led to the flood. We will consider the nature of divine grief, the meaning of favor in the sight of the Lord, and the theological significance of judgment as both destruction and cleansing. Genesis 5 has shown us continuity under death. Genesis 6 will show us corruption under scrutiny, and together they will lead us into one of the most profound moments of reckoning in the biblical narrative.